Trust Bank. You want to start with that? Hey everyone, good evening. It's so wonderful to see you. We apologize for the technical difficulties, but we're so happy to be back to talk about building trust with staff members, keeping morale high. This is something that is such an important topic. So let us know where you're coming from in the comments and what your role is. We have Dr. Brad Johnson here, who is absolutely amazing. He's going to give us some insights. But before we start on that topic, I want to do a check-in with everyone to see how you're feeling. School just started for some of us right after Labor Day, but many of us have been in school already for a couple of weeks. How has your first few weeks of school been going? Hopefully you've been having a really positive experience, that your students were excited to be back, that your staff is ready to come back. So we hope you've been having a wonderful start to your new year. In our last session, we talked about ways to build better boundaries. And I also want to hear an update from you on how that's going. You all know during the last session, I said my goal was to eat lunch this year, to sit down and actually enjoy my lunch. And I know that that sounds very minor, but that's very big to me. So I want to give you an update that I have been eating my lunch. I have been sitting down and taking the time to do that. And you know what? I felt a lot better. Brad, did you ever get to eat lunch when you were principal?
Have I ever missed a meal? No, I have not.
Okay, I usually graze, but I'm doing a better job of eating lunch. So I just wanted to give everyone that update that I've been keeping to that boundary, and it's been going really well. But we're so excited that you're here and joining us tonight to talk about how to build trust. We know that there's nothing more important than having the trust of our teachers and our staff members and the people that we serve. So today we just want to share a couple stories with you and give you some tips and insights. Also, don't forget to pick up a copy of our new book, Relational Intelligence, the Key Factor to Exceptional School Leadership. We start our book off with a bang, talking about trust. The whole first several set of chapters are dedicated to building trust, and great ideas and strategies are here. So please check out our book. It's out on Amazon now. Dr. Johnson, do you want to start by talking a little bit about the Trust Bank? Because that's something that we highlight in our book, and how we can make some deposits there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I think one of the most important pieces of leadership, maybe the very most important, is that trust factor. And, we call it that trust currency. It's hard to have it. It's built based on relationship and connection, which we talk about is one of the three pillars that we talk about as well. But connection doesn't mean much. Relationship doesn't mean much if you don't have trust. And so it's kind of a two-way street. You can't have one without the other. They rely on each other to be at their best. But yeah, when we talk about trust currency, we're talking about building that trust with your staff. Because, one of the first two things that people, when they engage with someone really for the first time, and especially someone that's in a leadership role, is can they trust that person? And so, if you can't trust someone, it's really hard to follow them. And if someone doesn't trust you, it's really hard to lead them. And so we talk about how we build that trust bank, that trust currency. And because you have to build that, and you have to build it daily. It's not something you do occasionally. And how you do that, you really begin with small things. The research is really clear that people trust you based on the little things. So it's the little conversations. It's, hey, how are you doing today? Just saying hello to someone in the hallway, catching a minute with them to ask them how their family's doing. It's those little conversations. It's not big conversations about curriculum or, standards or technology. And it's not even, it doesn't really begin with the professional things, seeing them as a human first. And so when we have leaders that see us as a human being first, and we see that they value that in us by having those small conversations, that is how we begin to build trust. And that's when you say, hey, you know what? This person cares about me as a human. They really are genuinely asking me, what's going on, how things are going, how's my family? So that builds trust. And it builds trust quicker than anything we can do from like a managerial perspective. And then as those small interactions build, we call that currency or that bank that you build. You're investing in it. You're putting money in it, like into a savings account. And that is so important on many levels. But one of the big is because when we are led by someone that we trust, we know that sometimes, even like as a principal, and this, you have to make decisions that may not be popular. You may make decisions or have to do things that others may disagree with on your staff. But if you've built that trust and they know that you truly are vested in them and care about them and want the best for them, they may say, you know what? I guess she's doing it because she has to, or there's no other choice. So they reason out and understand that you have their best interest in heart. And so they allow you to, in a way, they don't really allow you, but in a way they do, but they understand making these decisions that they may not agree with or may not be popular, but they understand that, usually she has our interest in heart, she cares about us and things like that. So they go along with it, and instead of fighting it and things like that. And so that's what we talk about, building that trust bank, so that when you have to do that withdrawal, when you have to make that unpopular decision, when you have to do something that maybe, people don't agree with, they understand a little better about where you're coming from. And if you don't have that deposited in, if you haven't built that trust with them, and then you start, kind of, we talked about the compliance thing, where you have to do it or this, that, and the other, then, they're not as receptive to it, or, maybe they just don't agree or don't go along or whatever. We have that conflict that arises. So, building that trust currency or adding to that bank is so important, because it does allow you to make those tough decisions sometimes that you inevitably will have to make as a leader.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know, Brad knows, and everyone on the call knows, as school leaders, we definitely are faced with sometimes having to make decisions that are unpopular. I know I grew up in a generation, and some of you may have too, where we might have asked our parents, why is this happening, right? And their response may have been, because I said so, right? Why is this decision happening? Because I said so. So a lot of people grew up in that generation. But, because I said so doesn't really work well in the position of an AP or a principal. People just don't respond to because I said so. Everything cannot be because I'm the principal, that's why you're doing it, right? Because that speaks to that compliance. And when people are compliant with you, they may be forward-facing, smiling, but behind you, they may be undercutting this work. They may be doing all sorts of things. And so it's important that we get rid of that mindset of because I said so, because when you're working with adults, you're working with people who truly care about this work. They deserve better than that. And so, as Brad said, those little conversations go a long way. We know that every educator is stressed. Even the ones who are the best at coming to work every day and putting on a happy face oftentimes have things happening at home, outside of their jobs, that are very stressful. And we have to remember that in our roles, because the same is true as us as leaders. We are also managing lots of things outside of our role, but we all still come to work and manage to put on that smiling face. So when Brad talks about having that opportunity to be one-on-one with someone, even if just for 5 minutes, putting down your phone and really taking that time to connect that means the world to people. When they know they have your ear, that you are actively listening to them, even if you're asking about their pets or, something about their family members or their favorite sports teams, that makes a difference. I know when I was a new teacher, I would often get flustered when there was a parent situation. If a parent was upset about something and I didn't exactly know how to handle it, I really valued that time that my principal or my assistant principal would come over to me and say, Rachel, do you want me to sit on in this call with you? Do you want me to sit in with the conference with you? Those are things that make a difference in how we are perceived in our roles. If we're going to say we're supportive, we can't just say that. We actually have to do it, because this is one of the roles people will watch every single thing that you do. They're not listening to what you're saying. They're watching what you do. And so that's the pressure point that I think is so true of principals and assistant principals, because we have to be very true to our word. And people are definitely going to be looking to us to say, she says she's supportive, but I didn't feel that, right? So it's important that we are what we say we are, right? If we say we care, that means we have to take time to listen to people. If we say we're going to be supportive, then we have to show up. And so those are just some ways to build trust. But I know, as someone who's now in my second school, that trust does take time. But I think you can gain it earlier and more often when we show praise and appreciation for the strengths of our staff and our buildings. Brad, do you want to talk a little bit about how we can show praise? And then I'll share some examples as well.
Absolutely. Anytime I talk about the research and the Gallup polls that talk about the importance of feeling valued, and part of that is appreciation. And, one of my quotes that I always say is that the staff morale is a reflection of leadership. And it really is. I think one of the hardest transitions that people that move into leadership do is we move into leadership roles most of the time because we're very successful at what we do. And so it's about what we accomplish and what we've done. And when you transition into that leadership role, it's about helping others be more successful and helping them accomplish things. And sometimes that's a transition that's tough for people. But one of the easiest ways to do that is to value your staff, to appreciate them, to give them praise. And we know that when we do that, when we value our staff in that manner, that the research says that they are 6 times more engaged. So that's how we get a staff that's going to, be there and basically run through a wall for their leader, is one that knows how to value them. And a lot of times, people will be like, well, how do you do that? And it can be simple things that can build as well. One of the things that we talk about in the book and that I love to share is, simple things like Post-its of praise. Because one thing I think that all principals, all leaders need to understand is that most teachers are what we call high agreeable. And high agreeable people speak a language of affirmation, which is a wonderful language to speak. It's why teachers are so affirming of and encouraging and empathetic and kind towards their students, is because that is their personality type. But because they are affirmational and speak that language, that's a language we have to speak to them as well. And so when we write those Post-its of praise that I talk about, when we send them an email, letting them know how much we appreciate them, or stop them for 5 minutes in the hall and say, hey, I heard about what you did, or I saw what you did, or I saw how you interacted with that child. And, you let them know that you see what they're doing. And that's how we value them a lot of times, is simply acknowledging what they do well. We know education and teaching is a tough job. Being a principal is a tough job. All the jobs in education are tough. But when we're in a position to be able to affirm people and encourage them and praise them and value them, it's so critical to their engagement level and helping them feel valued as a professional. One of the things we as humans, I don't care who we are, what level we are, we like to be acknowledged for a job well done. And so I think that's one of the most important things that leaders can do, is be in the hallways, be in the bus lines, be in the cafeteria, be interacting, and be positive to your staff. Don't be in such a hurry that you don't have time for the little things. Again, saying hi in the morning, good morning, saying their name. That sounds very simplistic, but I guarantee you, it will make a difference in their day.
Yeah, that's so true. It is the little things that matter. I know in our school, we have just a board that's in our copy room, and it just says a shout out. Who do you want to shout out? And so staff can just take a little note and write the person's name in a little bubble, what they did, and we just tape it up on the wall. And, even within the first 3 weeks of school, the wall is over halfway filled, that bulletin board. It is amazing. And I just will sometimes skim it and just smile as I see staff affirming each other. So if you don't have something in place like that, it's still early in the year. You can easily make little copies and just put them up and allow people to encourage each other. And we do like a little drawing at the end of the month. So if you're someone, when you sign the note, you get entered into a drawing, and then you get a coffee at the end of the month if we pull your name, and everyone gets a copy of their compliment. And on Fridays, hey, when you've had a long week and I happened to look up at the board and I saw one for me, and it just said, Rachel, you're always smiling and always stylish. How do you do it? And that just made my whole day. Something as simple as someone just acknowledging that work, it means a lot to me. And so we can do that for our staff as well. Another thing that I like to do is to take pictures just by using my phone. And every Friday, I will send out a Happy Friday email that just shows a picture of our staff, either with a student or instructing, or students together. And that's a nice way also to build that acknowledgement and the appreciation, because it shows the whole school, right? So that's another simple way that we can just bring more positivity into the day of our teachers and staff. Even when teachers are like wearing matching outfits, we might lift that up because it's something fun. So small things do make a big difference. So I appreciate Brad lifting that up, because we don't want to miss that. That is truly the essence of our work, is seeing and noticing the great things about the job. So I really appreciate you lifting that up, because the small things are the big things in this case.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it really is a transition. Principals need to understand it's not the work that you do that's going to make the school successful. It's the work that you encourage and empower and value your staff into doing that is going to make the difference. One of the quotes, I can't remember if we put it in the book or not, but I talk about, the best leaders don't command the room, but they connect with the room. And, and it's funny because we always hear the saying, don't be the smartest person in the room, or you're in the wrong room. Well, I don't know that's necessarily true or not, because I think the smartest person in the room is the one that can connect in the room. And so, it's not, we assume IQ, but like we talk about in the book, and that's why I think it's so important for every leader to read it, is that leadership is about relational intelligence. Your RQ is so much more important than your IQ. Your IQ might have helped you get there, but the only way you're going to stay there and be successful there is through those relationships that you have and that you build and grow and cultivate, so that you can build a staff that is successful. That is the key to leadership. That is the absolute epitome of effective leader is building that RQ. And the research even says the better you can build and the higher that you can build your relational intelligence, the more successful that you'll be as a leader.
So true. And, Brad, we've all worked with amazing principals and assistant principals kind of throughout our life. And we've seen some that have not been as successful. And one of the things that we can often point to are the relationships. That is what makes a difference, because ultimately no one is going to say, thank you for evaluating me in this way, or thank you, I like the way you helped me hand out papers and manage kids. It really is about, you cared about me. You knew me. You knew something about me. I was having a hard time with my kids, and you were empathetic and let me come in 5 minutes late when I was having a tough morning. That's what people remember. That's what people connect with. I remember years ago having a teacher that I don't work with anymore just saying, Rachel, I know that you cared about me when I was out sick with the flu, and you continued to check in on me, and you encouraged me to go home and not come back until I was feeling well. Now, in my mind, that was common sense to say, please don't come back until you're feeling well. But for her, it made a difference, because maybe not every principal would have said that. I don't know. But those things matter. How we respect and show respect to people makes a difference. And it's also about what we're modeling for other people. Because again, as principals and school leaders, we don't function in a small tunnel. Everything that we do is magnified. People are watching us and they want to know how we're going to respond to people, because that gives them cues and clues into how they might respond when they're faced with different things with their students. So that is important that we're modeling that. And Dr. Johnson, in our book, we also talk about the importance of communication. We spend a lot of time talking about how we can use communication to also build trust. And one of the things that I love that we talked about was that concept of transactional communication versus that authentic type of communication. Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and so one of the things I truly believe is about communicating to connect. And to me, that's about being empathetic. But when we frame it in relational intelligence, which we did in the book, it's more about not just empathizing with the person where they're at, but understanding where they're coming from in that situation. Because when you can do that, you can really kind of step back and examine, understand, process what they're going through, and be able to connect with them better, to communicate, to listen and to communicate better. And to me, that is, again, like I said, when we talk about the connection and trust, the intertwining of those is communication. Because if you're not, you're either talking to yourself or you're talking to a wall. Communication, I can't remember who said it, but they said our irony of most communication is that we think that it took place, between two people. Because a lot of times, if you're not really listening to connect, to really understand where they're coming from, especially if it's conflict or issues that you're having, small talk may or may not be as important. But I like what you said earlier, and we really do emphasize in the book, is to be fully present in any conversation, because that's just showing respect for a person. If you're sitting there and you're on your phone or you're on the computer, yeah, I know as a leader, whether you're principal or whatever level, you have a million things going on. You're always, on to the next meeting or rushing. But if you can't take a couple of minutes to be fully in the moment with that person, with that issue, the thing I like to say, and I'm pretty sure we share it in the book too, if you don't have time in that moment to give them your full attention, let them know that and set up a time where you can. That's showing them respect. And so, but if you're going to take the time to listen to them, you need to take, I usually gauge it by 2 or 3 minutes. If I can really engage with them and listen and figure something out in 2 or 3 minutes, let's just take the time right then to do it. And if not, respect them enough to say, hey, you know what, I can't give you my full attention right now, but let's meet this afternoon or whenever, because it's just about respecting them as a person as much as anything when we're communicating.
Yeah. And we know sometimes, Dr. Johnson, there are times when someone says, I need 5 minutes, but we know who that staff member is, and it's going to be 25 minutes. It's not going to be 5 minutes. That's okay, but we need to allot that time, because it's not going to be 5 minutes. So I think that's perfect, because as someone who talks a lot, if I say it's 5 minutes, it's probably going to be longer than 5 minutes. Some people can do it, but not me. But I do want to lift up the fact of what you said, that we have to be fully present. This is something that I personally struggled with for many years, which is because I'm such a multitasker, and because I like to move through things quickly as possible. I'm achiever. Achiever is one of my top 5 strengths from Gallup. So I like to move through things. But what I learned through an anonymous feedback survey years ago that I gave to my previous staff, the staff did not appreciate that. They did not. They said, We know and understand that you're responsive by email, but when we are sitting in the same room and you are not looking me in the eye and your attention is elsewhere, it bothers me. And I'm so glad I got that feedback. It was honest and it was necessary because it was a total blind spot for me. I was being more responsive to the computer and people who were not sitting right in front of me than the person who I was talking to. And that made me make an immediate change because I understood I'm not valuing someone's time if I'm in their presence, but my mind is elsewhere. So that's something that I've had to work on over the years. I'll be honest with you. I have had to work on that. But I know I am so far, I have to take my phone and actually leave it on the other desk. And I will sit with the table in my other office with someone with my computer and my phone on the other desk, because that is the only way that I can separate myself. I have to give myself that physical separation. And so if you're someone like me who does struggle with multitasking in front of people, you will probably need to do what I have to do, which is setting your devices in a different part of the room. That forces me to make eye contact and to stay engaged with that person. So try that if you're someone who struggles in that area. And that's, again, me just being transparent and honest, that was something I needed to work on. And the feedback has been much better. Like when I talk with staff, they're like, I appreciate the time. Thank you for sitting with me and giving me that attention or listening and helping me. So it's well worth it to try that strategy if you're like me.
Well, and I love the feedback that you got. One of the things we talk about in the book is kind of a 360 feedback, because especially for administrators, you usually get it from higher ups. They don't know what's going on, and just to be honest, if someone's at the district, they really don't grasp of what you're doing, how you're doing things like that. So it's so important, I think, to get that from your staff, and you have to be willing to be honest enough with yourself to accept it, know who's saying it. Again, that goes back to relationships. You know who's, coming at what angle or whatever. But I think it's so important. I know as a leader, one of the best ways I've ever grown was getting feedback from those that I led. As an administrator, getting it from teachers. Because again, there's some teachers that you take it with you understand the personalities and the people and where they're coming from. But there are some that share things like you said, like that you pause and you're like, you know what, you're right. And that's something that your superiors at the district office would not know. And so, I think it's so important to get that feedback, not just from those above you, but from those you work with, because, we talk about the point of our conversation tonight was about building trust. And I tell you, when you get feedback and input from your staff, that is also one of the biggest ways that you can build trust and a large amount of trust.
Yeah, that's one thing that I always encourage school leaders to do. It is different to ask everyone in your building to provide you with anonymous feedback, but it is something that I stand by. I have done it every year, and it always helps me to improve as a leader. And so I just encourage you to take the feedback, give your staff an opportunity. Honestly, I've done this for years. People do not necessarily take that time to bash you. They will take the time to provide something positive, something that you may or may not be aware of, and then anything else that they want to tell you. Those are the questions that I ask, 3 questions. And I really do take time to read over them, summarize them, and then take action on those things. That's a great way to build trust. I cannot believe we have been on this call for over 29 minutes. It's just about time for us to wrap up, but I also want to do one more plug for Relational Intelligence, the Key Factor to Exceptional School Leadership.
Awesome book.
Yes, it is an awesome book. It is a bestseller on Amazon, and we would love for you to pick up your copy today. If you enjoyed some of the insights that we shared, please know there are many more in our book. There are many people on the call that I saw today that already have a copy of this book that can attest to how well and how much they like the strategies, the format of the book. It's an easy read, but it's a helpful and necessary read. We have just a couple of seconds left, so I want to put a plug in for our next Strong Start Sunday, which is going to be September 21st at 7 p.m. live on Teacher Goals. We're going to be really focusing on families as partners. It's October. I mean, it'll be going into the fall, September into October, and we really want to make sure that our parents are partners with us in this work to help maximize student achievement. So thank you again for being here tonight. Thank you to Teacher Goals for having us. And we look forward to seeing you again on September 21st at 7 p.m. Night.